Time heat with cold seltzers, ciders, canned cocktails, and more. Details at specs.com. Cheers to savings.
Still some wrecks to tell you about. 10 westbound Mercury, just 8 left lane open. Also, a 10 eastbound Fry Road. They're working one with an 18-wheeler, as well as one 288 southbound McGregor. Reports of a new one, East Tex Freeway 69 northbound, right around Tidwell as well. Another steamy day today, low to mid-90s for the high. It's going to feel like near 107 or so. Right now, we're sitting at 85, Conroe 83 here at the University of Houston. You can see some winds, maybe 20 miles an hour today. Streaming live online at HoustonPublicMedia.org. It's KUHF Houston News 88.7. A service of the University of Houston. Stick around. Houston Matters starts right now, 9 o'clock.
3 years ago, Texas Republican lawmakers approved a state law eliminating Harris County's chief elections official and allowing state officials to intervene and supervise elections here. I'm Michael Haggerty in for Craig Cohen, and today on Houston Matters, how the state's using that law to take over elections in some other much smaller counties.
Houston Matters with Craig Cohen is a production of Houston Public Media with support from Baylor College of Medicine.
Also this hour, we hear the story behind a Houston-based nonprofit and how it's using some new approaches to prevent suicide. Plus, a headache expert from UT Health will answer your questions. You can send those now to talk@houstonmatters.org. And we discuss athletes and free speech, what they can say, do, and even wear on the field. Thanks for joining us on News 88.7. Remember to check out our live video feed on Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. We start, though, with a news update from NPR and News 88.7. Stay with us.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Vice President Vance has concluded the first round of high-level talks with Iranian officials in Switzerland. The mediators are Pakistan and Qatar. Officials from these two countries say technical teams from Iran and the U.S. will go on talking about the details of the preliminary agreement. NPR's Aya Batrawi has more.
Mediators say technical talks on Iran's nuclear program and U.S. sanctions are continuing through the week in Switzerland in order to reach a final deal within 60 days. They say the U.S. and Iran also agreed to create a, quote, deconfliction cell to ensure a ceasefire in Lebanon holds. This comes after high-level talks concluded in Switzerland in what mediators say was a, quote, positive and constructive atmosphere. Those talks almost didn't happen. Iran's delegation refused to meet Vance due to Israeli attacks on southern Lebanon. Iran then said it was closing the Strait of Hormuz, and President Trump threatened the U.S. could resume attacks on Iran. But by Sunday, the two sides were sitting down for talks, and there were no new attacks between Iran-backed Hezbollah and Israel in Lebanon. Aya Batrawi, NPR News, Dubai.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is resigning as head of the Labour Party, effectively stepping down as Prime Minister as well. He says he'll stay on as caretaker prime minister until a new leader is chosen. That could possibly be Andy Burnham, the former mayor of Greater Manchester. Burnham just won election to the UK Parliament last week and said today he intends to run for Labour Party leader. If he wins, he'll also become Britain's new prime minister. NPR's Lauren Freyer says his policies are not that substantially different from Starmer's.
He's seen more as sort of folksy, able to connect with voters in a way that Starmer did not. Perhaps slightly to the left of Starmer, more likely to sort of robustly defend a welfare state. But he will face the same headwinds, rising global energy prices, strained public finances. So in a way, this is a change in personality at the top rather than policy.
NPR's Lauren Freyer reporting. Stocks opened higher this morning on a day when investors are remembering the late Alan Greenspan. NPR's Scott Horsley reports he died this morning at his home in Washington at the age of 100.
The Federal Reserve said in a statement today that Greenspan's nearly 2 decades at the helm of the central bank was marked by periods of significant economic expansion as well as periods of considerable stress. Former colleagues say Greenspan brought rigorous analytical discipline to monetary policymaking and helped establish the credibility that remains one of the Federal Reserve's most important assets. Greenspan was an acolyte of the libertarian Ayn Rand and a reluctant regulator who believed bankers' self-interest would prevent them from excessive risk. He acknowledged the shortcomings of that hands-off approach only after risky behavior produced the great financial crisis 2 years after he left the Fed in 2006. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
You're listening to NPR.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Pew Charitable Trusts. sharing about the state of housing in America on the After the Fact podcast, available at pewtrusts.org/afterthefact, and the Doris Duke Foundation.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Matt Harrop. Investigators are trying to determine whether a Tesla was on autopilot when it crashed into a home in the Katy area. Video from the neighborhood shows the Tesla Model 3 driving at a high speed just before slamming through a brick wall of a home that killed 76-year-old Martha Avila. Harris County Commissioners Court are planning to appoint an interim director of the flood control district this week. Our Sarah Gruno has that story.
According to public documents, commissioners will discuss appointing Marcus Stuckett as the interim executive director of the Harris County Flood Control District in executive session on Thursday. Stuckett has been employed by the Flood Control District since 2015. It comes after former executive director Tina Peterson submitted her resignation after giving a presentation on delayed flood bond projects. In her resignation letter, Peterson said conversations about her role have become a distraction. She said she would work to support a smooth transition after her resignation. I'm Sarah Gruno, News 88.7.
The Supreme Court of Texas announced late last week on Friday that it would not hear an appeal by conservative activist Stephen Hotze in his latest lawsuit against Harris County's voter registrar. Our Andrew Schneider says the High Court upheld an appeals court ruling that Hotze and his fellow plaintiffs lack the standing to sue.
Hotze filed his lawsuit just before the 2024 presidential election, charging then Harris County tax assessor collector Ann Harris Bennett had let the county's voter roll become bloated with tens of thousands of illegal voters who needed to be purged. Chris Feldman is an election law attorney with the firm Feldman and Feldman.
He did not name one single specific voter. It was an attempt to just put more obligations on the county that are not required, an attempt to use that to say that Harris County is running flawed elections.
Hotze was demanding the county review the National Change of Address database on a monthly basis and promptly review and respond to challenges to the registration status of a voter. I'm Andrew Schneider, News 88.7.
86 degrees currently. I'm Matt Harrop, News 88.7.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Michael Haggerty, filling in today for Craig Cohen. Good morning. Thanks for joining us on News 88.7 and on Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. Coming up this hour, we hear the story behind a Houston-based nonprofit and how it's using some new approaches to prevent suicide. Plus, a headache expert from UT Health answers your questions. You can send yours now to talk@houstonmatters.org, or you can get on the line early at 713-440-8870. And we'll talk about athletes and free speech, what they can say and do and even wear on the field. But first, 3 years ago, Texas Republican lawmakers approved a state law that eliminated Harris County's chief elections official, and it allowed state officials to intervene and supervise elections here. To tell us how the state's using that law to take over elections in some other, much smaller counties across the state is Natalia Contreras, a reporter with the nonprofit news site Votebeat. Natalia, welcome to Houston Matters.
Hi, thanks for having me. Good morning.
Glad to have you. First off, just remind us what this law from 2023 did.
Yeah, this law from 2023 actually did a lot. If everybody remembers, in 2022, Harris County had a lot of issues during that election cycle. There was, lack of paper at polling locations. Election voting equipment just wasn't functioning correctly. There were polling locations that didn't open on time. There were long lines. It was just a lot of chaos that cycle. Also, if everybody remembers, it seems like decades ago, but there was also a need to add an hour of voting because of the lines being so long because of the lack of paper. And so that happened. And then in 2023, lawmakers were going to definitely zero in on Harris County and those issues. The county had created an elections department in 2020, which means that an appointed official by the county that was supposed to be a nonpartisan official was handling both voter registration and elections in the county at that time. And so after the fallout of everything that happened in that election cycle and all those problems, lawmakers in 2023 decided, you know what, the elections department, whoever's handling this, is not working, and we're going to totally get rid of this election official and place these duties back to the tax assessor collector to handle voter registration and the county clerk to handle elections. And, you know, a lot of voting rights experts at the time, and even election officials, election administration experts, you know, said that really wasn't going to be needed, or that wasn't the problem. The problem was that, you know, you had inexperienced people running elections in Harris County at the time. So it wasn't necessarily that the elections department itself was the problem, but it was just like who was handling these procedures, right? And so actually, whenever the state decided to place elections and voter registration back to the county clerk and the tax assessor collector, those offices had handled elections for many years in Harris County before. So it kind of, you know, taught a lesson that those folks that have experience are the best place folks to handle elections in any given county, not just Harris County.
The law kind of essentially targeted Harris County without actually targeting it by name. How did that law do that?
Yeah, so that law actually not just got rid of the elections department, and like you said, it targeted Harris County because it singled out a county with more than 4 million people, 4 million registered voters, which in Texas is only Harris County. And what it did too was that it allows the public to file complaints, any type of complaints, election complaints, voter registration complaints, to the Secretary of State's office, who then investigates, okay, what's happening? We're getting a lot of these complaints. You know, what is this about? Are you guys, you know, making an effort to resolve them? The law says that if the county doesn't, you know, fix the issues, then the state can come in and either, you know, be there monitoring, or ultimately, if nothing changes, decide to get rid of an appointed election official, and even file a petition to get rid of an elected official in those roles, which in this case in Harris County could be the county clerk and the voter registrar. But one other thing that I'll say is that through the process, as this law was moving through the legislative process, it added a provision that allowed the state to do the same thing in other counties that were being audited by the state. And what that means is, you know, since 2021, the state has been picking counties at random to audit and to come in and see, okay, how are things working? How are you guys handling your elections? Are you following the law? And every 2 years, they pick 4 counties. And Harris County has been audited already before, a couple of times. But this law allows the state to do the same thing, to come in and look at any problems and see if they need to be monitoring any county more closely, if it's any of those counties that are being audited. And in this case, it happened to be Val Verde County in the Rio Grande that is being audited, and that was put under state administrative oversight. And, you know, Harris County, ever since this law went into effect, and ever since the tax assessor collector and the county clerk have been at the helm, you know, people that have experience in running elections, we haven't really seen Harris County elections in the news that much. And so that move worked. But yes, the state is using this elsewhere.
So that other provision of the law allowed random audits. Val Verde County was one that got randomly audited and now is being taken over by the state under that provision. What did the audits find about Val Verde County and their elections?
Yeah, Val Verde County actually had a lot of problems in their voter registration. So Val Verde County right now is under a similar system as Harris County is now. The tax assessor's collector handles voter registration and the county clerk handles elections. And I hope that folks understand that those are two separate offices, but in order for them to work well, the voter registration side handled by the tax assessor collector has to be running smoothly. Voter registration records have to be accurate in order for the elections department, the county clerk, to be able to do their job, which in Val Verde wasn't happening. According to the preliminary audit that the Secretary of State's office released, Val Verde County didn't have a policy in place of how they were handling their voter registration records. The voter registration records were inaccurate. There were duplicate records sometimes, which means that, you have multiple people that are registered multiple times. Other issues that were found is that there were people that were living in the same household that were assigned to different precincts. And what that means is that if you and your wife are registered to vote in the same location, you try to go vote at the polling location, and then one of you gets one ballot and the other one gets a different ballot, which shouldn't happen. So those were the kind of things that were happening. Whenever voter registration records are not kept accurate, then that is a problem when folks try to go vote.
Are there any other counties the state has taken over so far under this provision?
No. And so, whenever we hear the word taken over, it sounds like, okay, the election officials in those counties are not doing their job. And that's not the case. So what's happening right now is that the state is very closely monitoring Val Verde County. Those elected officials, the tax assessor collector and the county clerk, are still handling elections in that county, but they're very closely being monitored by the Secretary of State's office, who is going to be providing reports not only to the state, but also to county officials to see whether those problems are being resolved. So one thing that I just want to make clear is that the law initially seemed to be really punitive, as its motive to kind of punish, if you will, election officials. It was what it sounded like when it was being proposed initially, but it's the way that it's working in Val Verde County. And I talked to, the county judge in Val Verde and even the tax assessor, who is under administrative oversight right now by the state. And they're very welcoming of the state's help. The state has election law experts who work for the Secretary of State's office, who are there helping them fix these issues. And ultimately, Senator Paul Betancourt, who's the one who was the author of this law, he told me that ultimately this is what he wants. If there are issues in any given county, they should be fixed. And so this is kind of a way to just very closely monitor whether these election officials in any given county are fixing the problems that exist and to get the support that they need to fix those problems. But I guess the good news here is that, Harris County hasn't had any of these type of problems. The state hasn't had to come in to Harris County initially, but ultimately, I think the problems that we saw in 2022 is what led to this law and what's leading to some of these fixes elsewhere.
So leaders in Val Verde County, as you said, seem to be happy about this, or at least welcome some oversight. State Senator Paul Betancourt, Republican, you mentioned, from Harris County, from Houston, says the law is working as he intended. Are there anything that, say, election policy experts saying as they watch this? Not a takeover, but election oversight of these counties?
Yeah. And so, like I was saying earlier, there were a lot of people who were worried and concerned with something like this happening. What does this mean? Does this eliminate local control of elections? What would this do? I think there was some concern and some fear when this law was first proposed about what it would do and how it would look like. And this is a really good example of how it would look like, how it's looking like, and how it's working. And yeah, in Val Verde County, the county judge told me they've been having problems for years and they hadn't been resolved. I've seen chatter on social media about Val Verde County and voters seem frustrated with the problems over there. So it seems like this help from the state and the support from the state has been helping. And those election policy experts that I had talked to initially when this first was proposed, who were concerned about this, are hopeful that this law, like I was saying earlier, is turning out to be not as punitive as they imagined initially, but more of a help and support that election officials might actually need in smaller counties that don't have as many resources as the larger counties do in Texas. If you want election security, if you want voter registration accuracy, that takes training, that takes resources. It's not cheap. It's not easy. Elections are very complicated, and there's a lot of laws that election officials have to follow. So if the state is coming in and providing some support, that's why election officials in Val Verde County are really welcoming it.
Natalia Contreras is a reporter with the nonprofit news site Votebeat. Natalia, thank you for explaining all this to us.
Thank you so much.
Up next, the science behind new methods of preventing suicide, and the story of a local nonprofit putting those new tactics to use. That's as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
Support for Houston Public Media.
You count on Houston Public Media. That's why you're here right now. Take the next step and become a new member today. Every gift makes a difference. And with a gift of $5 a month or more, you'll receive PBS Passport, a member benefit that lets you stream more of the shows you love anytime. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. Join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
Company, a workers' compensation provider that's been caring for hardworking Texans for over 30 years. More at texasmutual.com/expert partner.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Houston Grand Opera, presenting its 2026-2027 season, including Verdi's Aida, Mozart's The Magic Flute, and Kern and Hammerstein's Showboat. Information at hgo.org.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Michael Haggerty, in today for Craig Cohen. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. Nearly 49,000 Americans died by suicide in 2024, and there were more than 2 million attempts that year. That's according to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. A Houston-based nonprofit is among those trying some new evidence-based approaches to try and prevent suicide. Here to tell us more and about the personal story behind the organization's work is Maggie Seeliger, who's the founder and president of Love You Adam Foundation. Maggie, welcome to Houston Matters.
Thank you very much.
And we welcome your questions, comments, stories even of what you may have experienced when it comes to a friend or loved one in crisis at 713-440-8870. or talk@houstonmatters.org, where you can comment on the live stream of today's show on Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. Maggie, let's start with your story. Love You Adam refers to someone important in your life. Obviously, Adam. Who was he? What happened to him?
Thanks. So Adam was my brother, and in 2023, we lost him to suicide. As a result of that, I entered into this world around suicide and suicide prevention that I had no information about previously. And what I found was that unlike cancer, heart disease, other issues, there really wasn't a widespread evidence-based approach to preventing suicide. So can you imagine going to the doctor, finding out you have cancer, and not being able to use drugs that you know are going to solve the problem? And so in doing that, a family friend introduced me to one of the leading experts in suicide prevention in the United States, Dr. Craig Cohen. And we partnered, and through my foundation, I am funding therapists to get evidence-based training in how to help their patients to decide not to go that route.
Yeah, we want to dig into that in a little bit in a minute. But when you were your own story, I mean, in the aftermath of your brother's suicide, I mean, were there questions? What were the things in your mind that were driving you that you said didn't have answers to?
So again, the basic question for me is, why wasn't there better help for him? He lived in Wyoming. It's a remote area of the country. One of the highest rates of suicide per capita. It's actually 3 times the rate as the national average. And people don't have easy access to therapists. And in addition, those therapists don't have the training other than traditional talk therapy. And so I felt that surely there were better answers out there. And if one of the blocking aspects of this is that therapists don't have the right training, then there's an opportunity to help get that training.
So what are some of the methods in the past that I guess were out there that, whether it's therapists or whoever, first responders even, were using, or the lack thereof, I guess, that help me understand what kind of was done in the past and what's kind of the new approach, before we get into the new approaches, the evidence-based things that are help people, not go down that route. What was kind of the past methods, I guess?
It's the present method, actually.
Yeah, still the present,
is if you've been to a therapist and you go through a question and answer session, like anybody who go to therapy, there's not a different way of addressing someone who is suicidal. Now, many use different types of approaches, like, say, a safety plan, which is kind of like a contract that says, you're not going to take your life. If you have an issue, you're going to, call this person. So you're sort of asking the person to sign something and say, well, I'm not going to do this. But as the numbers show, that's really not an effective way. And besides that, there are approaches, but many are very expensive and not accessible to most people.
Yeah, like you're saying, and we'll get into what therapists maybe are doing or being trained, or you're trying to help them get trained to do. But that's assuming if someone gets to a therapist, like
Exactly.
you said, your brother and others. There's so many barriers to it, just where you live, economics,
Yep.
social stigma. What is out there for those folks who never get to the therapist point?
Yeah, and that's the challenge. They have to know that there's an ability to go to a therapist, even if it's virtually, to get help. But again, it's not necessarily going to mean that they will not go through those struggles alone. So the better approach is that there are therapists who are trained to help them work through those moments before they get to that point. And that's what we're all about.
Are things like the 988 suicide hotline, lifeline, effective or helpful steps forward, do you think, before people get to that therapist?
I think that even before someone gets to that point, the goal would be to arm them with the emotional management skills, which is what this training does, to be able to work through those challenges and those moments of crisis so that they don't get to that point where they're having to make the phone call. Now, certainly that is a stopgap that I don't know if we have data numbers yet, but it's clearly a resource that's being utilized by many people now that it's nationally in place.
So as you mentioned, your organization, Love You Adam Foundation, is funding training for therapists to help them use different tactics. What are some of those new tactics, evidence-based, that, can you give me some examples of what therapists would be doing differently in these new approaches?
Yes, so the approach we use or we train is crisis response planning. And it's a way of showing an individual or arming an individual with the ability to have a plan on how to work through when they start to have suicidal ideation, when they notice signs, physical signs, they get anxious, their heart beats faster, they have physical signs. Who are the people in their life that matter and that care about them? What are their reasons to live? So they're developing this structured way that most people who are not suicidal automatically do and work through in their mind to never get to that point. But the evidence shows that many people who are suicidal aren't able to do that on their own. So it's building that skill set. That work, which has been led by Dr. Craig Cohen, my partner, has shown to be 74% more effective than traditional talk therapy at preventing suicide.
How do you measure that 70%? How do you know that?
Research. Yeah, they've done many clinical trials. They've done both in terms of veterans, which is a large part of what his focus has been, and also the civilian, as they call it, population, to ensure that they're doing this with efficacy around the research itself.
What do we know about suicide rates and numbers in Texas, Houston specifically? Are there career professions that have higher numbers, those sorts of things?
Yes, Texas as a state has the largest number of suicides in the country by number, not by rate like, say, Wyoming or some of those states, but certainly the total number. And Houston and Harris County are the highest in the state.
Bigger state, bigger city.
Bigger state, bigger city. We also have a lot of the professions that are most impacted by suicide, and that would be construction and oil and gas, as well as hospitality, restaurants, people who are working in those service jobs. And so that in of itself makes Houston a great place to build the support for this approach.
Is the business community receptive, interested in trying to address, the people in those industries interested in addressing this issue and working to somehow intervene? They
are. So Bechtel, as a company, one of the largest construction companies in the world, has taken a mission to embed that training in some of its folks that it puts on its projects to support the staff with mental health, and also to fund research and to fund support within the community with the Suicide Prevention Coalition that you mentioned earlier.
What resources would you recommend to loved ones who may be concerned about someone in their life that they might be dealing with suicidal thoughts or ideations?
So I would say, there's many resources. Certainly the large nonprofit associations that have lots of information on their websites about it. I like to say that prevention and awareness are two different things, and that prevention is where the big focus needs to be. So if they're looking to find out who in Houston is trained with this approach, on loveyouadam.org, there are lists of those therapists who have received training. We also hold virtual workshops for therapists. Now, 2026 is completely sold out. It's free, but sold out in terms of capacity. But we'll be bringing back the workshops in 2027 and training therapists, so that's also on the website.
Are there some warning signs people should be looking for in loved ones if they are concerned? Maybe, hey, is this person considering suicide, or are they saying and doing things, but how serious are they? Those questions.
There are not always warning signs. There's certainly concerning signs that someone is depressed, or if they're saying that they're suicidal, but not everybody is saying that or acting that way. And so sometimes, there's not a ton that we can do other than show we support them. However, when we can move them toward making sure they themselves have the tools to move through that situation, that in itself will help as well.
It's interesting, too, to think about mental health professionals, therapists of any sort, not having adequate training, I guess, in suicide prevention. You'd think that they that would be a part of training, and maybe it is to some degree. Is it something that's not trained on, or is it just the science is emerging and coming out and catching up with the times?
So it's not normally trained. 98, I think, % of therapists are not formally trained in suicide prevention. They will get tools around safety planning and some other things that have been around for a long time and use those. However, evidence-based training is really relatively new in the last 5 to 10 years, and it costs money. It also takes them away from a day of revenue of having patients, and so it becomes difficult for them to get that even later. So we're funding the training for them, but they're still giving up a day of clients in order to attend that. So for me, that shows me how much they want to make a difference and how important it is. And we're seeing a lot of whole groups, whole clinics, many of them more crisis community centers who would never be able to pay for this training. They are sending entire teams to the workshops, and they're taking that away as their unified approach to suicide prevention going forward.
Maggie Seeliger is the founder and president of the Houston-based nonprofit Love You Adam Foundation. As we've said before, if you or someone you know is dealing with suicidal thoughts or ideations, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is 988. Maggie, thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
Just ahead, a headache expert answers your questions, which you can send now to talk@houstonmatters.org, or you can call us or text 713-440-8870. Stay with us as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
Hello, I'm Ernie Manous. Our show, Hello Houston, is live.
It's not just your car. It's the one that brought your kids home from school, took you cross-country, held memories, laughter, even a few breakdowns. When it's time to let go, give your car a new purpose. Donate it and turn memories into meaningful support for this station. Plus, you'll enjoy free and easy pickup, potential tax benefits, and a simple donation process. Your gift supports the programs you and your family love. Donate today and help keep public media strong. Call or donate online.
The latest news and information from around the world and across the street. Trusted journalists keeping you connected by keeping you informed. Search HPM Plus on your smart and connected TVs and stay informed.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from Baylor College of Medicine. Baylor's work centers on advancing health and medicine through research, education, and patient care.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Michael Haggerty. Headaches are something we all deal with from time to time, but the frequency, intensity, and causes can all vary. Maybe it's something mild because you just haven't had your cup of coffee yet this morning, or an eye strain headache from too much screen time. That would be me. Or perhaps something debilitating like a migraine. From time to time, we bring in experts on a wide array of subjects to answer your questions. And today, Dr. Hamid Hamdi is here to answer your questions about headaches, and he's the lead neurologist at the Headache Clinic at UT Health Houston Neurosciences in Sugar Land. Dr. Hamdi, welcome to Houston Matters.
Thank you very much. My pleasure to be here.
Glad to have you. And we welcome any questions our listeners have at talk@houstonmatters.org, or you can call or text us at 713-440-8870. You can also comment on the live stream on today's show at Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. First off, Doctor, what are some of the most common causes of headaches?
Well, the most common causes of headache would be migraine. Generally, we divide headaches in terms of cause to as a primary headache or a secondary headache. So primary headache would be a headache which in itself is the disorder, not a symptom of something else in your body. Whereas headaches that can be caused by other things going on in your body, either the head and neck area or other parts of the body, would be called secondary headache. So the most common cause is migraine, of course.
And what exactly is migraine then? Then how do we define that? I think most of us.
Very interesting question. Yeah. So migraine is a complex disorder. It's a the brain itself generates this syndrome, this symptom, headache. It actually starts off about 24 to 48 hours before the actual headache, what we call the migraine prodrome, where different areas of the brain start getting active and we start having these changes of mood changes, difficulty concentrating, increased urination. A very interesting phenomenon in that phase is often cravings for certain foods. People can have cravings for chocolates or sweets, and often these then go on to be blamed as a trigger for their migraine. We think that at least in some cases, these things are not triggers, but rather caused by the migraine itself. The craving for those things were caused by the migraine, and then the migraine happened. So basically, migraine is a complex disorder within the brain system where different parts of the brain become active, leads to increased sensitivity to pain, and leads to a significant disability.
What exactly is happening physically in the brain when you have a headache? I've always wondered that. Is it, it's just your brain is, we think of as this thing that does all the perceiving for us, or processes all the ways we perceive things. And so you're just like, that's just telling me the feeling. But actually there are things, what is actually physically happening or even changing in the brain when you have a bad headache or a migraine?
So there are changes in the neurotransmitters in certain parts of the brain, right? So, parts of the brain that are sensitive to pain stimuli within the head and neck area, right? Those become more sensitive to these pains. One of the things that happens is that over a period of time, as we have more and more attacks of migraine, those networks become more efficient at producing these symptoms. So certain people will have this brain that is more sensitive. So most people who do not have migraines, their brain does not perceive it as much as painful as other people, So this is basically a network of neurotransmitters that becomes active within the brain.
We have a question from a viewer on YouTube, Brandon, who says, when should it be advised against pushing through a headache? It can be very easy to dismiss a headache as a nuisance and not as a serious indicator of something.
Yeah, so one of the things that we physicians often call thunderclap headache, which is a headache that happens suddenly, peaks within seconds to minutes, and often perceived as the worst headache of the life. And such headaches should always be treated as emergency, because those can be a manifestation of something serious like bleeding around the brain, So any headache that is unusual and sudden onset should be treated as an emergency.
Yeah, it sounds like it. We're talking about headaches with Dr. Hamid Hamdi of UT Health. He's a neurologist there. We welcome your questions and comments at 713-440-8870 or talk@houstonmatters.org. What new research or treatments are out there these days that are out there to help people dealing with headaches or migraines?
So the newest thing that we have is the CGRP inhibitors, right? So these are medications that target the CGRP molecule, which is specific to migraine pathology. For a long time, we had been treating migraines with medications that were originally designed for conditions like depression or seizures or blood pressure, but they were found to be useful for migraine prevention. And so we were using those with modest success. Then we came across this molecule, CGRP, which sensitizes the brain structures causing the pain. And we have been able to target the receptors as well as the molecules. And so we have a bunch of new medications nowadays, which can be used both for prevention of migraine and abortion of an attack of migraine, or cutting short an attack of migraine when it happens. So the CGRPs are the main new medication.
Okay. Let's go to a caller. We have Cal, who's calling us from West Chase. Cal, go ahead. What is your question or comment for Dr. Hamdi?
Oh, so hey, thanks for taking my call. I've had headaches I'm 50, and I've had headaches all my life, and I've tried like everything, and multivitamins to SSRIs and everything in between, and some of them work, but not very well. But recently, about 6 months ago, on a headache Facebook group chat, someone suggested turmeric and ginger. And I just add a little bit, about half a gram of each, to my food each day. And over about a month, it's been quite successful. I mean, it hasn't worked perfectly, but it's reduced my headaches and migraines by about 50%. Is there an explanation for that? And is it safe to do that? Take turmeric and ginger every day?
It is safe to do that. I don't really have an explanation for that, but different things work for different people. So if it works for you, I think it is a safe. Turmeric and ginger is a safe ingredient, and if it's working for you, I would say go ahead and use it.
All right, thanks, Cal, for that. When it comes to kind of more basic headaches, we are used to maybe taking something like acetaminophen or ibuprofen to take headaches. How do you make sure you're using those safely?
That's a very important question. So you can use them, first of all, to use them for mild to moderate headaches. They're going to be effective and they're fine as long as you don't overuse them. So we say using acetaminophen or ibuprofen up to 10 to 15 days per month is about the maximum. If you're having to use them more frequently, then this can lead to what we call medication overuse headache or a rebound headache. And what happens is then you end up using them more and more frequently, the headaches become more frequent, and gradually the headache may transform into a chronic headache.
Interesting.
So it is okay to use them occasionally for up to moderate headaches. For severe headaches, I don't think those things will work. You will end up needing prescription medications.
Interesting that using those to treat your headaches may lead to more headaches down the road if you overuse them. Are things like our addiction to smartphones and tablets contributing at all to more headaches or different kinds of headaches these days?
Potentially, yes, but there hasn't been any clear proof of those things. But potentially, I would say, bright lights, people who have migraine, if they're exposed to blue lights or bright lights, that can trigger migraines. We often recommend, avoiding those things. So yeah, excessive use can do that. Plus, not just migraine, it can trigger other types of headaches too. Tension headaches, being constantly on the screen, those things can do that.
Are things like blue light glasses useful, effective at that sort of thing?
Yes, we definitely recommend those for people with refractory headaches.
What else is on the horizon when it comes to our understanding of headaches? How's it changed in recent years, or what may be coming down the road?
Well, down the road, there are several things going on, basically trying to understand the mechanism, what triggers the migraine within the brain, the changes that are happening. So at this point, I think the research is mainly focused on the CGRP.
And that was those, the inhibitors that,
Yes.
type of drugs there that may be helping people. All right. Well, Dr. Hamid Hamdi is the lead neurologist at the Headache Clinic at UT Health Houston's Neurosciences and Sugarland. Excuse me, Dr. Hamdi. Thank you for answering our questions today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Still to come, athletes and free speech. We discuss what they can do, what they can say, and even where on the field. Stay with us as Houston Matters continues here on News 88.7 and on YouTube.
A year ago, one of the deadliest floods in U.S. history tore through the Texas Hill Country. Since then, we've been following up with survivors.
Everything is gone.
And people who lost loved ones.
I find myself just shaking my head saying, I can't believe I find myself here.
You can hear their stories on the podcast After the Flood from the Texas Newsroom and PBS's Frontline on June 24th.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from Baylor College of Medicine. Baylor's work centers on advancing health and medicine through research, education, and patient care.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from the Energy Corridor District, working to sustain public safety and improve area streetscapes to foster a strong business environment for developers, property owners, and entrepreneurs.
The Department of Justice has opened an investigation into Major League Baseball over possible discrimination after 4 players from the San Francisco Giants wrote Bible verses on their hats during the team's Pride Night on June 12th. The team's Pride Night hats featured the rainbow version of the Giants logo. One pitcher opted not to wear the special hat, while 3 other pitchers wore the rainbow hats but wrote scripture citations on them. The league issued the players warnings, pointing out the writing of any kind on a uniform, regardless of the message, was against regulations. Some lawmakers, including Texas Governor Greg Abbott, have weighed in, accusing MLB of discriminating against Christian ball players. And then also just last week, a professional baseball team in the Independent Atlantic League, the York Revolution, forfeited its game on June 18th because several players refused to wear rainbow-themed jerseys for that team's Pride Night celebration. Here to talk about all that and discuss athletes and free speech is Jeff Balke, who writes for Houston Press and co-hosts the Bleav in Astros podcast. Good morning, Jeff.
Hey, good morning, Michael.
Okay, so first of all, what's your general reaction been to these stories?
Well, it's going to be a grumpy Gen Xer response. Really, the whole thing kind of annoys me on multiple levels. I should say first that I have numerous very dear friends and family members who are part of the LGBTQIA plus community. I have very strong love and support for all of those people. And I support baseball's decision to promote Pride Night each year. I think it's a great thing for baseball, and I think it's a great thing for those fans. Having said that, I also support the free speech of people to say what they want in the United States of America. What annoys me about most of this is, first, baseball's insistence on blocking people from writing things on their uniforms. They've stopped people in the past from writing like Happy Mother's Day on their cleats and things of that nature. And again, they're just warning them. There's no suspensions or anything. But it's akin to the NFL saying you get a penalty if you celebrate in the end zone afterwards. It seems like a something that is fraught with problems. I'm also annoyed with the fact that we've turned this into yet another pearl-clutching, hand-wringing, virtue signaling social media extravaganza over the fact that somebody wrote a Bible verse on his hat. I'm not a big fan of that personally, but he can say what he wants. Baseball made a deal out of it because it's part of their regulations. And then, of course, a group of people has taken it and to the extreme. Like the Department of Justice getting involved is ridiculous. This whole idea of everybody, listen, if you don't want to wear the uniform, if you want to write something on it, like honestly, I don't really care. But I'm pretty sure if those pitchers had written a verse from the Quran on there, nobody would be talking about it. So more than anything, as a baseball fan, I'm frustrated that we're being infiltrated with the same sort of culture war nonsense in baseball when we're having a really interesting and kind of fun year in baseball overall.
That another example of maybe our country and the politics in it, where we grab onto something, these symbolic things, and kind of turn them into big things, where meanwhile we haven't changed our policy on fill in the blank. Well, the economy or immigration, we haven't settled those things, but we've...
Well, exactly. It's a big argument that is not going to result in any changes whatsoever. I mean, nothing actually is going to happen. The Department of Justice probably isn't going to find that Major League Baseball is violating people's free speech because they are an organization and businesses have the ability to regulate their employees to a certain degree. And, of course, baseball is probably not going to change their regulations because they don't want people randomly writing on their uniforms all kinds of different messages, whether it's Happy Mother's Day or a Bible verse.
And these players weren't fined, as you mentioned. I mean,
no.
And even if they were, I guess, most of these all of them are wealthier than you and I. I mean,
right.
I assume.
Also, let's be fair.
They could be like, I'm going to write this anyways and pay the fine because I want to.
Well, let's be fair. These are 3 relief pitchers. We probably wouldn't even know who they were if we weren't Giants fans, right?
And so, names,
and so this is a situation where, again, I don't really blame baseball. I don't blame the pitchers. I don't blame. I look at this as something that probably should have been shrugged off, but because of the culture that we're in now, it's become a much, much bigger deal than it ever should be.
Are there other times that come to mind for you when you think about players are write or wear something controversial over the years or do something like that?
Well, I mean, in baseball, there have been numerous instances of players writing things on their cleats, like, rest in peace for the people that passed away, Happy Mother's Day, things like that. They've all been given warnings exactly the same way. In other sports, there was the incident here in Houston where one of the players wrote "Pay me Rick" on the side of his shoes, demanding more money from the then general manager of the Texans, and that caused quite a little bit of a furor. And then, of course, there are more open and public displays that we've had much greater debates on, like Colin Kaepernick refusing to stand for the national anthem and things like that. I think free speech does often, cross swords with sports, and those sometimes spill out into the greater conversation at large, and sometimes they don't. Most of the time it depends on what the controversy is. If the controversy is, "Pay me Rick," well, pretty much the only people who cared about that were football fans. When the controversy involves someone kneeling for the national anthem or a Christian Bible verse or Pride Night, then it obviously falls more into the public discourse than others would.
It becomes a much, much bigger thing. And again, we said these players, they got just a verbal comment, not a real fine, not a real punishment. But I know you're not a constitutional law professor, but let's talk about free speech. In that, a lot of us think, okay, I can say whatever I want, whenever I want, which is not true. You can say whatever you want, whenever you want, but there may be consequences for those things, right? I mean, these players can say and do and wear things, but there may be fallout from that.
Correct. I think it's important to delineate the difference between the legal sort of foundational idea of freedom of speech that is, whereas somebody says something and they're punished by law, that's one thing. That is a completely separate thing from what we're dealing with here. What we're dealing with here is essentially a business entity making decisions about what their employees can or can't do as representatives of that business. It would be no different than if you were working at your job. My mom worked in public schools, and she used to occasionally have to tell kids to go home and change their T-shirts because they were inappropriate for school. This is very similar in that regard. It's not really a free speech issue. This is more of a rules and regulations and violation of them issue. Again, I think what people do a lot of times in our own society, and I think social media has exacerbated this, is they believe that they should be able to say whatever they want whenever they want because of freedom of speech, without any kind of consequence, without any kind of backlash. But that's not how it works in a free society. You have the right to say something. Other people have the right to respond. The people who work are employees for organizations. The organizations have a right to respond and set rules and regulations for themselves. And you, of course, have a right to say what you want. But the fact of the matter is there might be backlash from that. And you have to understand that and recognize it. And again, I think much of this has been made a big deal of because of the singular nature of what the society that we live in, and the fact that we have a lot of people who are very reactive about specific topics. In this case, we're dealing with one of the most hot-button issues in American politics, and that is Christianity and the LGBTQIA plus community, and where those two items intersect in our public discourse. And unfortunately, we have way too many people out there spending too much time making a situation that probably shouldn't even be there. It's pride. Allow people to be happy and love who they want to love, and you say what you want to say. And baseball, come on, just don't be so weird, right? I've tried to figure, in all of these sports, don't be weird. Just let things happen. Understand there's going to be some backlash or whatever. But I could have told baseball personally, if they write something on their uniform and you reprimand them, you know what's going to happen.
Disgruntled Gen X rant complete.
For now.
For this time at least. Jeff Balke of Houston Press and Bleav in Astros podcast. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Michael.
We're out of time. That does it for this edition of Houston Matters. I'm Michael Haggerty. You can relax. Craig's back tomorrow. Join us then for more Houston Matters.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from Baylor College of Medicine. Baylor's work centers on advancing health and medicine through research, education, and patient care.
Support comes from Metro. World Cup planning includes transit improvements in